Let me write the full novel now. The creator's last stream, The Three-City Trap. On the evening of April 17th, at precisely 8:43 p.m. Eastern Time, the internet held its breath. 87,000 pairs of eyes were watching. 87,000 screens flickered with the warm amber glow of a charcoal grill, the gentle sizzle of marbled pork belly, and the easy smile of a man who had made millions fall in love with the simple act of traveling and eating. And then, in the span of 11 seconds, 87,000 people watched that man die. His name was Jake Whitmore, 34 years old, 10 years a creator. His channel, Wanderlust Jake, had amassed 3.2 million subscribers over a decade of relentless, joyful exploration. He was the kind of traveler who didn't just visit places, he inhabited them. His camera wasn't a tourist's lens. It was a window into the soul of wherever he happened to be. A diner in Tuscaloosa, a fish market in Hokkaido, a midnight food stall in Bangkok. Wherever Jake went, his viewers went with him, and they loved him for it. That evening's stream was supposed to be the capstone of his signature spring series. 3 cities, 1 day. The concept was simple but ambitious. Start the morning at a historic site, hit a famous food market at midday, and end the night at a beloved local restaurant, all in different cities across America, all in a single day's journey. It was the kind of logistical feat that Jake made look effortless, and his audience ate it up. The day had begun at dawn in Collinsville, Illinois, at the Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site. Jake had stood atop Monk's Mound, the largest pre-Columbian earthwork in the Americas, as the spring sun painted the Mississippi River Valley in shades of gold and rose. Dogwood blossoms dotted the surrounding flatlands like scattered confetti, and Jake had spoken to his camera with the quiet reverence he always reserved for places of deep history. Good morning, everyone. Look at this. 1,000 years ago, this was the Manhattan of America. 20,000 people lived here, more than London had at the time, and now it's just grass and sky and silence. That's what I love about travel. It reminds you that everything is temporary. By noon, he was in Seattle, Pike Place Market. The cacophony of fishmongers hurling salmon through the air, the aroma of fresh-baked pierogies, the clatter of tourists and locals jostling for space in the narrow aisles. Jake had navigated the chaos with practiced ease, his camera capturing the controlled pandemonium, while he narrated with infectious enthusiasm. Okay, you know the drill. When in Pike Place, you eat chowder. But today I'm going off script. There's this tiny stall in the lower level that does a smoked salmon bisque that will make you forget every soup you've ever had. He'd slurped down the bisque with theatrical gusto, commented on the depth of flavor, the hint of dill, the perfect temperature. The chat had exploded with heart emojis and hungry faces. And then, the final stop, New York City, a small Korean barbecue joint tucked into a side street just off the High Line in Chelsea. Ember and Ash, 12 seats, reservation only, the kind of place that didn't need a sign, because everyone who was supposed to find it already knew where it was. Jake had been a regular for 3 years. The owner always saved him the corner booth, the one with the best light for streaming. At 8:40 p.m., Jake was grilling pork jowl fatty, marbled, glistening under the overhead lamp. Rain was tapping against the window, and Jake had positioned his microphone to pick up the sound. Listen to that. Rain on glass, meat on charcoal. This is my ASMR, guys. This is what peace sounds like. At 8:42, he placed a perfectly crisp slice of pork jowl into his mouth, chewed twice, then reached for the bubbling kimchi jjigae beside the grill. He lifted a spoonful of the broth to his lips and swallowed. At 8:43, his right hand shot to his throat. His eyes went wide. The smile vanished. Something was happening behind those eyes, something terrible, something his body understood before his mind could catch up. His pupils contracted to pinpoints. His left hand trembled violently, knocking against the table. The spoon clattered to the floor. He managed, just that. One syllable. Then he pitched forward, his shoulder catching the edge of the table. his body sliding from the booth to the floor with a heavy, graceless finality. The camera, mounted on its tripod, continued recording. It captured the empty booth, the still sizzling grill, the untouched beer, and the faint curl of smoke rising from the charcoal. The chat erupted a waterfall of panic, disbelief, desperate calls for help. Jake Whitmore never moved again. Detective Frank Moretti of the NYPD's 10th Precinct arrived at Ember and Ash at 9:17 p.m. The EMTs had already pronounced death. The body lay where it had fallen, the streaming equipment still recording until a uniformed officer finally reached over and pressed the power button. Moretti was 53, heavy-set, pragmatic. He'd seen enough death in 30 years on the force to have developed a taxonomy of it: the violent, the accidental, the natural, and the suspicious. This one, at first glance, fell into the natural category. No signs of trauma, the medical examiner's preliminary report stated. No visible wounds, no ligature marks, no evidence of physical assault. Facial cyanosis present, consistent with acute cardiopulmonary failure. No indication of choking or airway obstruction. Moretti ordered a full toxicology sweep of the restaurant. Every item on Jake's table was bagged and tagged: the pork joel, the kimchi jjigae, the banchan, the beer, the water glass, the chopsticks, the grill itself, even the charcoal briquettes. The kitchen was examined. The other patrons were interviewed. The restaurant owner, a 60-year-old Korean immigrant named Mrs. Park, was beside herself with grief and fear. Jake was like family, she kept saying. He come here every week. Same food every time. Nobody sick from my food. Never. 30 years, never. 3 days later, the toxicology results came back. Every single item tested negative for known poisons, toxins, or harmful substances. The pork was clean, the soup was clean, the beer was clean, the charcoal was standard restaurant-grade lump charcoal, nothing. The full autopsy confirmed acute respiratory failure leading to cardiac arrest, but could not identify a specific pathological cause. Jake had no history of heart disease, no congenital defects, no drug use. His most recent physical, 8 months prior, had given him a clean bill of health. Moretti rubbed his temples. Young guy, no history, drops dead on camera. No poison, no trauma, no choking. What does that leave us? Sudden cardiac death, the ME suggested. It's rare in someone his age, but not unheard of. Could be an undiagnosed channelopathy brugada syndrome, long QT. Something that wouldn't show up on a standard physical. 87,000 people watched this guy die, Moretti said. The internet is going to eat us alive if we call it natural causes. With respect, detective, the evidence supports natural causes. I can't find what isn't there. The case was headed for a quiet close filed under sudden unexplained death. A footnote in the medical literature, a tragedy for the fans to mourn and eventually forget. But 2 people refused to let that happen. The office occupied the 3rd floor of a brownstone on Irving Place, just south of Gramercy Park. The building was old 1880s construction, all dark wood and high ceilings and creaking floorboards. The brass plate beside the entrance reads simply, E. Blackwood, Private Investigations. Elliot Blackwood, 46 years old, former NYPD homicide, decorated twice, forced out once. He'd left the department 5 years ago after a public disagreement with the brass over a case they wanted buried and he wanted solved. The case got buried. Blackwood got a private investigator's license and a reputation as the man you called when the police couldn't or wouldn't find the truth. He was lean, angular, sharp-featured, with prematurely silver hair that he wore slightly too long and eyes the color of gunmetal. His trademark was a heavy oak walking stick with a brass ferrule, not an affectation but a necessity, the legacy of a bullet that had shattered his left kneecap during a raid in the Bronx 11 years ago. The limp was slight but permanent, and the stick had become an extension of his body. His partner, associate, colleague, the terminology shifted depending on her mood, was Dr. Nadia Volkov, 31 years old, former forensic chemist with the FBI Laboratory Division at Quantico, specializing in toxicology and biochemical analysis. She'd left the bureau 18 months ago, officially due to professional differences, unofficially because she'd refused to sign off on a lab report she believed to be incomplete. The bureau didn't appreciate dissent. Blackwood did. Nadia was tall, athletic, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that missed nothing. She kept her brown hair in a practical braid and dressed with a deliberate lack of vanity jeans, boots, plain shirts that somehow emphasized rather than concealed her intelligence. On the evening of April 19th, 2 days after Jake Whitmore's death, the two of them sat in Blackwood's office watching the livestream archive for the 7th time. A client had brought them in. Marcus Webb, Jake's college roommate and oldest friend, who'd watched the stream in real time and couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Watch his pupils, Blackwood said, pausing the footage at the critical moment. The image was frozen on Jake's face, captured in the instant between the first sip of soup and the first sign of distress. See that? Rapid meiosis, the pupils are constricting. In cardiac arrest, you'd expect mydriasis. Dilation, not constriction. Nadia leaned closer to the screen. You're right. Pinpoint pupils are a hallmark of organophosphate poisoning. Cholinesterase inhibition causes parasympathetic overactivation. And look at his left hand, 5 seconds before he collapses. Blackwood rewound slightly and played again. See that tremor? That's not a cardiac arrhythmia tremor. That's fasciculation. Involuntary muscle fiber contractions at the neuromuscular junction. Consistent with organophosphate toxicity, Nadia confirmed, her voice taking on the flat, focused tone she used when her mind was accelerating. But the tox screen came back clean. If there was an organophosphate in the restaurant food, the NYPD lab would have found it. Which means the poison wasn't in the restaurant food, Blackwood said. He stood and began pacing 3 steps to the window, turn, 3 steps back. It was his thinking rhythm. Consider this, Nadia. What if the poison wasn't in any single location? What if 3 separate, individually harmless substances were administered at 3 separate locations over the course of a single day, designed to combine inside the victim's body through natural metabolic processes? Nadia was silent for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, a sequential synthesis toxin. Exactly. 3 precursors, 3 cities, 3 opportunities for administration. Each one passes any standard toxicology screening because each one, in isolation, is completely non-toxic. But when they combine in sequence inside the human body, they synthesize into a lethal compound that was never externally present in any detectable form. Nadia's eyes had gone wide. That's theoretically possible. There are academic papers on cascade prodrug systems. But to weaponize that concept for murder, the level of biochemical knowledge required would be extraordinary. Then we need to trace Jake's entire day. Every stop, every bite, every drink, starting from the beginning, starting from Cahokia. Blackwood and Nadia flew into St. Louis the following morning and drove the short distance east across the Mississippi to Collinsville, Illinois. Cahokia Mound's State Historic Site spread before them under a pale spring sky, a vast expanse of manicured grass punctuated by the massive earthen mounds built by the Mississippian civilization nearly 1,000 years ago. Monk's Mound dominated the landscape. 100 feet tall, covering 14 acres at its base, it was the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Western Hemisphere. Jake had stood atop it at 6:47 a.m. on the day of his death, filming the sunrise and speaking to his audience about impermanence. Blackwood and Nadia climbed the wooden staircase to the summit. From the top, the entire site was visible, the smaller mounds scattered across the plain, the reconstructed Woodhenge to the west, the distant glint of the Mississippi beyond the tree line. It was a place of profound quiet. He was up here for about 20 minutes, Nadia said, consulting her tablet where she'd time-stamped every moment of the archived stream. Then he descended and walked the interpretive trail around the Grand Plaza. At 7:22 a.m., someone approached him. She pulled up the relevant section of footage. A young woman appeared on screen, early 20s, athletic build, wearing a St. Louis Cardinals baseball cap and large sunglasses that obscured most of her face. She was carrying a small paper bag. "Oh my God, are you Wanderlust Jake?" "I'm such a huge fan." The woman's voice was bright, enthusiastic, unremarkable. "I can't believe I'm seeing you here. I brought you something. It's a local thing, a wild sassafras root tea. There's this amazing woman who makes it from foraged ingredients right here in the bottoms. You have to try it." Jake had laughed, charmed as always by fan encounters. "No way. That's so cool. You're too kind." He'd accepted the paper bag, pulled out a small glass bottle of amber liquid, and taken a long drink on camera. "Wow, that's incredible. You can taste the earth in it, you know? Like drinking the history of this place." Blackwood paused the footage. The first precursor, administered at 7:22 a.m. under the guise of a fan gift. A sassafras root tea, Nadia mused, or something disguised as one. Sassafras has a very distinctive flavor profile, earthy, slightly sweet, with hints of root beer. Easy to mask a foreign compound in. We need to find that bottle, and we need to find that woman. The bottle proved easier than expected. Jake, ever the considerate visitor, had disposed of it in a recycling bin near the Cahokia Mounds Museum. The site's waste management contractor confirmed that recycling from that week had been sorted, but not yet processed at the county facility. After several phone calls leveraging Blackwood's connections with the Illinois State Police, they gained access to the recycling batch. After 2 hours of searching, recovered a small glass bottle with a hand-printed label reading, "Prairie Root Tea, Foraged Local." No commercial manufacturer by that name exists, Nadia confirmed after a quick search. Hand-printed label, artisan-style bottle. Designed to look like a small batch local product. Sophisticated, Blackwood observed. Not a crude forgery, a deliberate construction meant to appeal to Jake's aesthetic sensibilities. The killer knew he valued authenticity, local craftsmanship, the undiscovered gem. They used his own values against him. Nadia sealed the bottle in an evidence bag. "I'll run a full analysis when we get back to New York. But I'll bet my PhD that whatever's in here will test as completely non-toxic in isolation." As they left the site, Blackwood paused at the base of Monk's Mound and looked up at its grassy summit. 1,000 years of silence. And now, another death woven into its history. "The woman," he said. "Let's look at her more carefully." Back in their rental car, Nadia pulled up the footage on her laptop and enhanced the image. The Cardinals cap, the oversized sunglasses, the nondescript athletic wear, all designed to be forgettable. But Blackwood's eye caught something else. "Her shoes," he said. "Look at the soles. There's a distinctive red-orange clay on the left heel. That's not the soil here at Cahokia. This is Mississippi River bottomland, black alluvial silt. But red clay like that is found in specific locations, southern Illinois hill country, maybe, or certain construction sites. It's out of place." "And her hands," Nadia added. "When she passes the bag, you can see her right index finger. There's a callus pattern consistent with extensive lab pipetting work. That's a scientist's hand, or a pharmacy technician's, or a grad student's." Blackwood filed the observations away. "Let's move to Seattle." They caught a flight from St. Louis to Seattle that afternoon. By evening, they were walking the rain-slicked cobblestones of Pike Place Market, retracing Jake's steps from the day of his death. Pike Place was quieter in the evening than during the midday chaos Jake had filmed. The fish stalls were closing up, the flower vendors packing away their bouquets, but the lower level where Jake had eaten his smoked salmon bisque still hummed with activity. The stall was called Silish Sea Soups, a narrow counter manned by a heavyset man in his 50s with a walrus mustache and the permanent squint of someone who'd spent decades staring into steam. "Yeah, I remember him," the stall owner, Gus Pedersen, confirmed. "The YouTuber kid. He's been here maybe 4-5 times over the years. Always gets the bisque. Always puts it on his show. Good for business." His face fell. "Terrible thing, what happened?" "Mr. Peterson," Blackwood said. I'd like to ask about anyone else who was near Jake while he was eating. Did anyone sit beside him? Did he interact with other customers? Gus thought for a moment. We've got maybe 6 stools at the counter. He was at the end, near the wall, so his camera could get the angle he wanted. The guy next to him. Yeah, there was a guy. Ordered the clam chowder. They chatted a bit, you know. The YouTuber was friendly with everybody. Can you describe him? 30ish. Lean. Wore a Seahawks hoodie. Had glasses, I think. Pretty forgettable, honestly. Oh, but I do remember one weird thing. Gus leaned forward. He had this little bottle with him. Like a hot sauce bottle? He put some on his chowder. I thought that was odd, who puts hot sauce in clam chowder? But hey, to each his own. Did that bottle come anywhere near Jake's food? Gus's face went pale. You don't think I mean, my food is clean. I've been here 22 years. We don't believe your food was tampered with, Mr. Pedersen, Nadia reassured him. We're looking at something else entirely. But please, did the bottle touch Jake's food? Not directly. But Gus's brow furrowed. Now that I think about it, the guy left the bottle on the counter when he went to the bathroom. And it was sitting right next to the communal condiment tray, the one with the crackers, and the hot sauce packets, and the extra spoons that all customers share. When he came back, he picked it up, but he trailed off. Blackwood and Nadia looked at each other. We need the stream footage from this segment, Blackwood said. Frame by frame. Back at their hotel, they pored over the Pike Place portion of Jake's livestream. The camera had been handheld during this segment, so the framing was less stable, but Nadia managed to isolate several key moments. At 12:47 p.m. Pacific Time, Jake was eating his bisque. In the background, slightly out of focus, the man in the Seahawks hoodie could be seen at the adjacent stool. And there at 12:49, the man's hand, reaching across the counter, placing something near the condiment tray. The motion was casual, unhurried, utterly natural. No one would notice unless they were looking for it. At 12:52, Jake reached for the communal hot sauce. He shook several drops into his bisque, a habit his regular viewers knew well, and stirred. There, Nadia said softly. The condiment bottles were switched. The man placed his own bottle, identical in appearance to the house hot sauce, in the communal tray. Jake used it without a second thought. Precursor B, Blackwood confirmed, disguised as hot sauce, delivered through a communal condiment system. Ingested voluntarily by the victim, witnessed by no one with any awareness of what they were seeing. And like Precursor A, it would test as completely harmless on its own. Capsaicinoid compounds, the active ingredients in hot sauce, are ubiquitous. Any residue would be attributed to normal dietary intake. The killer is meticulous, Blackwood said, staring at the frozen frame. And patient. They didn't just plan the murder, they planned the invisibility of the murder. They flew back to New York the next day and went directly to Ember and Ash, the Chelsea barbecue restaurant where Jake had died. The restaurant was closed, had been since the incident, but Mrs. Park let them in with red-rimmed eyes and shaking hands. The private booth where Jake had streamed his final meal was undisturbed, cordoned off with police tape that had already been officially released. Blackwood sat in the booth where Jake had sat and studied the space. He cooked his own meat on the tabletop grill, Blackwood said. The pork joel was provided by the restaurant, same cut they serve every customer. The kimchi jjigae was made in the kitchen, standard recipe. Nothing here was tampered with, because nothing here needed to be tampered with, Nadia said. She was seated across from him, her laptop open, scrolling through biochemistry databases. I've finished analyzing the residue from the Cahokia bottle. As predicted, it contained a thiophosphate ester precursor suspended in a sassafras-flavored base. Completely non-toxic, metabolically inert until exposed to a specific catalytic trigger. And the hot sauce from Pike Place? I didn't have a physical sample. It was used up, and the bottle was presumably recovered by the perpetrator or disposed of. But based on the molecular logic of the system, I can infer what it contained. a modified capsaicinoid derivative structurally similar to natural capsaicin, but with an appended functional group that initiates a condensation reaction with precursor A in the gut lumen. English, Nadia. She smiled thinly. The spicy stuff from Seattle meets the tea stuff from Illinois inside Jake's digestive system. They link together to form an intermediate compound still non-toxic at this stage. This intermediate circulates in his bloodstream for several hours, waiting for the final trigger, which is palmitoleic acid, a monounsaturated fatty acid found in high concentrations in pork jowl, especially the fatty cuts Jake preferred. When digested and absorbed, palmitoleic acid activates a specific liver enzyme cytochrome P453A4. This enzyme oxidizes the intermediate compound, converting it into a functional organophosphate, a novel cholinesterase inhibitor. The high sodium content of the kimchi jjigae accelerates intestinal absorption, flooding the bloodstream with the final toxin within minutes. The restaurant was innocent, Blackwood said. Mrs. Park was innocent. The killer never needed to set foot in this building. All they needed was for Jake to eat what he always eats. Exactly. The final stage required no external intervention whatsoever. Jake's own habits, his own food preferences, his own body chemistry, all of it was weaponized against him. His metabolism became the murder weapon. Blackwood was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Who knew his food preferences at this restaurant? Anyone who watched his streams regularly could know. But to be absolutely certain of what he'd order, and when you'd need access to his private schedule." His manager, Blackwood said, his producer, the person who built his career and controlled every aspect of his public life. Ryan Mercer, 37 years old, executive producer and co-owner of Wanderlust Media LLC, the production company behind Jake Whitmore's channel. A former pharmaceutical marketing executive who'd pivoted to digital media 5 years ago, when he'd recognized the goldmine that Jake represented. Blackwood and Nadia spent 2 days building a comprehensive profile of the man. Mercer had met Jake at a content creators conference in Austin, Texas, 5 years prior. At the time, Jake had 400,000 subscribers and was running the channel, solo filming, editing, and managing sponsorships all by himself. Mercer had approached him with a proposition: "Let me handle the business side, and I'll make you a star." The proposition had worked. Under Mercer's management, the channel had exploded. Strategic brand partnerships, algorithm optimization, cross-platform promotion. Mercer was brilliant at the mechanics of internet fame. Within 2 years, Jake hit 1 million subscribers. Within 4, 3 million. But the partnership had soured. Jake wanted out, said Casey Torres, a mutual friend of both men. Blackwood had tracked her down through Jake's social media connections. He felt trapped. Ryan controlled everything: the schedule, the sponsors, the brand deals, even which restaurants Jake could feature. Everything was monetized, optimized, squeezed for maximum revenue. Jake missed the days when it was just him and a camera and the open road. Was there a contractual dispute? Blackwood asked. A massive one. When Ryan came on board, Jake signed a partnership agreement that gave Ryan 50% ownership of Wanderlust Media and all its intellectual property. Jake didn't have a lawyer review it. He was 29, a knave. Now that the channel's worth tens of millions, Jake wanted to renegotiate. He wanted to leave, start fresh, go international. He kept talking about Egypt, about Morocco, about seeing the world beyond sponsored hotel reviews. And if Jake left, Ryan would lose everything. The channel without Jake is worthless. The audience follows the personality, not the production company. Ryan's 50% of nothing is nothing. What's Ryan's background? Before media, he worked in pharma, sales and marketing, I think, for a company in New Jersey. Blackwood's jaw tightened. Which company? I don't remember the name. Something with BO in it. Nadia ran the background check that evening. Ryan Mercer, Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry from Rutgers University, Master of Business Administration from Wharton. employed for 6 years at Meridian Biopharmaceuticals as Director of Product Marketing before transitioning to media. Biochemistry undergraduate degree, Nadia said. He has the foundational knowledge. Organic chemistry, pharmacology, metabolic pathways, it's all in a biochem curriculum. But designing a 3-stage prodrug assassination system, that's beyond undergraduate level. Maybe. But he had 6 years in pharma, access to researchers' literature, proprietary drug delivery systems. And Nadia pulled up another record. Before joining Meridian, he spent 2 years in a gap period. His LinkedIn says independent consulting. No details. 2 years unaccounted for. What was he doing? I'll deeper. But first, let's look at what he had access to regarding Jake's schedule. The answer was everything. As executive producer, Mercer controlled Jake's calendar down to the minute. He selected destinations, booked transportation, arranged restaurant reservations, and most critically, built the content schedules, detailed documents specifying where Jake would be, at what time, and what he would eat each stop. The April 17th schedule was created by Mercer's account 3 weeks in advance. Nadia confirmed accessing the shared production drive through credentials provided by Jake's estate lawyer. Look at this, there's a file called Jake 3 Cities Foodnotes.doc that literally lists Cahokia morning tea local foraging angle, Pike Place smoked salmon bisque, add hot sauce per usual brand. Ember and ash pork jowl, kimchi jjigae rain ambience. He scripted everything, including the moments when each precursor would be administered. Blackwood said he knew Jake would accept a fan's Gens gift at Cahokia because Jake always accepts fan gifts, it's part of his brand, the accessible everyman. He knew Jake would use communal hot sauce at Pike Place because Jake always uses hot sauce. Mercer had filmed him doing it 100 times. And he knew Jake would order pork jowl and jjigae at Ember and Ash, because that's what Jake always orders there. He turned Jake's predictability into a weapon. The perfect murder. Committed across 3 time zones, using 3 accomplices who didn't know they were accomplices, killing a man with his own habits. Blackwood and Nadia needed to confirm that Mercer had orchestrated the first 2 stages through intermediaries. This meant finding the woman at Cahokia and the man at Pike Place. They started with the digital trail. Blackwood's contacts at the FBI, former colleagues from his days working joint task forces, ran a discreet search on Mercer's financial records. 2 payments stood out. 3 weeks before the murder, Mercer had transferred $2,500 via Venmo to a woman named Taylor Nguyen in Edwardsville, Illinois, 15 minutes from Cahokia Mounds. 1 week before the murder, he'd sent $3,000 to a man named Derek Huston in Tacoma, Washington, 30 minutes from Pike Place Market. Both payments were labeled content production freelance talent. Blackwood tracked down Taylor Nguyen first. She was 24, a graduate student in environmental science at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. She was confused but cooperative. "Yeah, I did that gig," she said when Blackwood and Nadia met her at a campus coffee shop. This guy Ryan, from some production company, reached out through a gig economy app, said they were doing a birthday surprise for a famous YouTuber. All I had to do was go to Cahokia Mounds at a specific time, find the guy, give him this tea, and act like a fan. They gave me the tea in a nice bottle and told me exactly what to say. I thought it was just like a reality show thing. A prank? You weren't suspicious? Nadia asked. Why would I be? It paid $2,500 for 30 seconds of work. The tea tasted normal. I tried to sip myself before I gave it to him. It was just like herbal tea. Earthy, a little sweet. Nothing weird. And you're fine? No health effects. Totally fine. I never thought about it again until you showed up. The story was nearly identical with Derek Huston, a 31-year-old barista in Tacoma. Same app, same pitch of brand activation for a food channel. He was given a bottle of hot sauce and told to sit at the counter at Salish Sea Soups during a specific time window, make small talk with a YouTuber if the opportunity arose, and leave the bottle in the condiment area. Seemed like a weird marketing thing, Derek said. Like guerrilla marketing or whatever it's called, the sauce was legit. I tasted it. Spicy, normal hot sauce flavor. No idea anything was wrong with it. Neither Taylor nor Derek had been told the true purpose of their actions. Neither had any connection to Mercer beyond the single transaction. They were unwitting pawns, vectors of delivery who had no reason to suspect they were participating in murder. This is what makes it so diabolical, Nadia said afterward. Even if we'd found these people immediately after the death, they couldn't have told us anything useful. They didn't know what they were carrying. They didn't know what they were doing. And the substances they delivered were genuinely harmless. Taylor even drank the tea herself with no ill effects. The crime is distributed, Blackwood agreed. No single actor committed a murder. A woman delivered tea. A man placed a hot sauce bottle. A chef cooked pork. A restaurant served soup. A man ate his dinner. And somewhere in the convergence of all these innocent acts, a human being was killed. Back in New York, Nadia commandeered a friend's analytical chemistry lab at Columbia University. She needed access to high-resolution mass spectrometry and nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy instruments far beyond what her portable kit could provide. The Cahokia bottle's residue yielded its secrets under the LCMS-MS. The primary compound was a phosphorothioate ester with a molecular weight of 287.3 daltons. Its structure was cunningly designed, closely resembling limonene, the primary terpene in citrus fruits, which explained why it tasted like sassafras tea and would pass as a plant-derived compound in any standard analysis. In isolation, this molecule is metabolically inert, Nadia explained to Blackwood, sketching molecular structures on a whiteboard in the lab. It circulates in the blood without being metabolized by any of the body's normal enzymatic pathways. It just sits there. Waiting. For what? For this. She drew a second structure. Precursor B, the capsaicinoid derivative in the hot sauce. I don't have a physical sample, but I can deduce its structure from the reaction products. It would be a modified vanilloid compound with a reactive aldehyde group appended to the 4 position of the aromatic ring. When this compound encounters precursor A in the intestinal lumen, the aldehyde group attacks the phosphorothioate ester's sulfur atom, initiating a condensation reaction. And that produces an intermediate, call it compound AB, still non-toxic, but now it has a specific structural vulnerability. The oxidation-susceptible side chain. She drew an arrow to a part of the molecule. When compound AB reaches the liver via portal circulation, it encounters cytochrome P450 3A4, a common metabolic enzyme. Under normal circumstances, this enzyme metabolizes all kinds of foreign compounds. But when it encounters compound AB in the presence of elevated palmitoleic acid, from the pork jowl, exactly, the fatty acid acts as a cofactor, altering the enzyme's binding pocket geometry. Instead of normal hydroxylation, the enzyme performs an unusual oxidative desulfurization, converting the phosphorothioate into a phosphate. And a phosphate ester with this particular structure is a cholinesterase inhibitor. A potent irreversible cholinesterase inhibitor. Structurally novel, it won't match any known organophosphate in standard databases, which is why the NYPD's tox screen didn't find it. They were looking for known compounds. This one has never existed before it was synthesized inside Jake's body. Can you prove this? Definitively? Nadia nodded. I've requested additional blood and tissue samples from the ME's office through Marcus Webb's lawyer. If I can detect the metabolites of the final toxin, the hydrolyzed phosphate fragments in Jake's blood, it proves the compound was present at the time of death. Combined with the precursor found in the Cahokia bottle and the testimony of the 2 intermediaries, we have a complete chain. Do it. 2 days later, the results were in. Jake Whitmore's preserved blood samples, analyzed by high-resolution mass spectrometry with a sensitivity 100 times greater than standard tox screening, revealed unmistakable traces of the predicted metabolites. The molecular fingerprint matched perfectly with Nadia's theoretical model. Jake Whitmore had been murdered. With scientific proof of murder in hand, Blackwood approached Detective Moretti. The meeting was tense at first. Moretti didn't appreciate being told his department had nearly buried a homicide, but the evidence was irrefutable. "This is real?" Moretti said, flipping through Nadia's report. "Someone actually designed a poison that assembles itself inside the victim's body? Over the course of 10 hours, across 3 cities, using the victim's own metabolic processes as the final synthesis step," Blackwood confirmed, "and we can tie it to one man." Who? Ryan Mercer, Jake's business partner and producer. Motive: a multi-million-dollar channel that becomes worthless without Jake, and Jake was about to walk away. Means: a biochemistry degree from Rutgers and 6 years in pharmaceutical development. Opportunity: total control of Jake's schedule, food preferences, and public interactions. Moretti was quiet for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. "I'm going to need a warrant." The warrant yielded a treasure trove. Mercer's home computer contained browser history showing extensive research into prodrug systems, organophosphate synthesis, and cytochrome P450 enzyme kinetics. His cloud storage held a document encrypted, but cracked by the FBI's digital forensics team titled Project Sunset. It was a detailed plan, step by step, precursor synthesis protocols, dosage calculations based on Jake's body weight, timing windows based on metabolic half-lives, contingency plans. Everything except remorse. His email archives revealed the communications with Taylor Nguyen and Derek Huston casual, businesslike, utterly unremarkable in tone. "Hey Taylor, quick gig this Saturday morning at Cahokia Mounds. Easy money, just deliver a birthday gift to a creator we work with." The banality of it was chilling. And there was more. In a storage locker in Hoboken rented under a false name but linked to Mercer through credit card records, police found a small chemistry setup. Glass beakers, a magnetic stirrer, a rotary evaporator, residues that match precursors A and B, and a notebook, handwritten, containing the synthesis routes in meticulous detail. Ryan Mercer was arrested at his apartment on the Upper West Side at 6 a.m. on April 28, 11 days after Jake Whitmore's death. But the arrest almost didn't happen the way it was planned, because on the night of April 27, the night before the warrant was executed, Mercer made a move. It was Blackwood who anticipated it. "He's going to run," he told Moretti. "Or he's going to destroy evidence. Maybe both. He knows we've been investigating. He's smart enough to have noticed the scrutiny. If we wait until morning, he may have already cleaned his trail. We don't have the warrant yet. It's being signed tonight. Then, put eyes on him tonight." Moretti agreed. An unmarked car was stationed near Mercer's apartment. At 10:30 p.m., Mercer emerged carrying a backpack and a small, rolling suitcase. He hailed a cab. The tail followed him downtown. Mercer's cab stopped at West 14th Street, the southern entrance to the High Line. He paid in cash and began walking north along the elevated park. The High Line at night, a ribbon of green suspended above Manhattan's streets, lit by recessed ground lights that cast long shadows through the ornamental grasses. In April, the plantings were lush with early spring growth alliums, sedums, and wild geraniums spilling over the concrete walkway. Few people walked it at this hour. Rain had begun to fall, a fine, persistent mist that softened the city lights into halos. Blackwood received the update from the tail and immediately understood. The High Line connects to Chelsea. Jake's restaurant is near there. And so is Mercer's storage locker. Nadia finished. She'd been tracking the tail on her phone. He's going to clean it out. Call Moretti. Tell him we need to intercept before Mercer reaches the locker. The warrant isn't signed yet. If we grab him now, we don't need to arrest him. We just need to prevent the destruction of evidence until the warrant comes through. Blackwood and Nadia took a taxi to West 23rd Street and entered the High Line from the north, walking south. Mercer was walking north. They would meet in the middle. The rain intensified. Water pooled on the steel rail tracks, preserved in the walkway's surface remnants of the park's former life as a freight line. The overhead vegetation formed a dark canopy, and the city noise below seemed muffled, distant. It was an eerily liminal space, neither street nor building, neither nature nor architecture. Blackwood saw Mercer's figure approaching through the mist. The man was walking quickly, head down, the hood of his jacket pulled up. The rolling suitcase bumped over the paving stones behind him. Blackwood positioned himself in the center of the path and waited. Mercer looked up when he was 20 feet away. His pace faltered. He stopped. "Mr. Mercer." Blackwood's voice was low, but it carried clearly through the rain. The oak walking stick was planted firmly before him, both hands resting on the brass head. "Who are you? Get out of my way." Mercer's voice was tight, controlled, but his eyes were already darting left, right, looking for another path. "My name is Elliot Blackwood. I'm a private investigator working on behalf of Jake Whitmore's estate." Mercer's face went still. In the dim light, his expression was unreadable, but Blackwood could see the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his grip tightened on the suitcase handle. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just taking a walk. Now move." "Mr. Mercer." Blackwood took one step forward. His voice was quiet, measured, implacable. "You believed that the ancient mounds of Cahokia and the chaos of Pike Place Market and the rain-soaked streets of Chelsea would be your perfect alibi. 3 cities, 3 invisible acts, and the camera itself as your witness to innocence, because how can a murder happen on live stream with no murderer in sight?" Mercer's composure cracked, just a fraction, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. "You divided the poison into 3 harmless pieces and scattered them across the country like breadcrumbs, feeding them to Jake through strangers who didn't know what they carried, trusting that his own body would do the killing for you." Blackwood's voice hardened. "The cruelty of it turns my stomach. You didn't just kill him, you made his own life, his own joy, his own habits into the instrument of his death. You're insane," Mercer said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "You can't prove any of this. Dr. Volkov's mass spectrometry analysis has identified the final toxin's metabolites in Jake's blood. The precursor compound was recovered from the bottle your agent delivered at Cahokia. Taylor Nguyen and Derek Huston have both provided statements identifying you as their employer. Your hard drive contains the synthesis protocols. And that suitcase," Blackwood pointed with his stick, "contains what you're hoping to destroy before the police find it." Mercer's face went white. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. The rain fell. The city hummed below. Then Mercer bolted. He abandoned the suitcase and sprinted north along the High Line, his sneakers slapping against the wet pavement. He was fast, younger, and lighter than Blackwood, and for a moment, it seemed he would escape into the darkness. But Nadia had been waiting. She emerged from behind a stand of birch trees 20 yards ahead, directly in Mercer's path. He tried to swerve past her. Reaching into his jacket, a canister of pepper spray appeared in his hand, his thumb on the trigger. Nadia's reaction was instantaneous. She sidestepped his lunge and drove the heel of her palm into his wrist with surgical precision. The canister flew from his grip, clattering across the walkway. In the same motion, she grabbed his extended arm, pivoted, and used his own momentum to direct him sideways into the railing. Mercer bounced off the metal rail and staggered, off balance on the rain-slicked surface. He stumbled forward 3 more steps before Blackwood's walking stick, swung low and fast with the accuracy of a fencer's blade, caught him cleanly across the ankles. His feet went out from under him and he crashed to the ground, sliding on the wet pavement until he came to rest against a bench. Blackwood was on him in 2 strides. The brass ferrule of the stick pressed firmly against Mercer's sternum. "Stay down." Behind them, footsteps. Moretti and 2 uniformed officers running from the 23rd Street entrance. "Ryan Mercer, you're under arrest for the murder of Jake Whitmore," Moretti announced, handcuffs already in hand. "You have the right to remain silent." The steel click of the cuffs punctuated the night. Mercer lay on the wet ground, chest heaving, eyes staring up at the rain that continued to fall indifferently from the dark sky above. Ryan Mercer initially demanded his lawyer and refused to speak. But over the following 72 hours, as the full weight of evidence mounted, the chemical analysis, the intermediary testimonies, the computer files, the storage locker contents, the financial records, his legal position became untenable. On the third day of interrogation, with his attorney present, Mercer began to talk. It wasn't supposed to be this way. His voice was flat, drained of effect. He sat hunched in the metal chair, his expensive haircut wilted, his designer stubble now genuine neglect. 5 years. I gave him 5 years of my life. I built that channel. I made him. He was already a creator before you came along, Moretti said. He was a hobbyist. Mercer snapped, showing the first flash of emotion. 400,000 subscribers and $100 a month in ad revenue. I turned him into an empire. 3 million subscribers, 8 figures in annual revenue, brand deals with hotels, airlines, credit cards. I did all of that. The strategy, the negotiations, the optimization, and in return you took half of what I built. That's fair. He wanted to leave. Mercer's jaw clenched. He wanted to throw it all away. Go to Egypt. Film himself riding camels in the Sahara like some gap-year college kid. He was 34 years old and he wanted to start over from zero. Do you know what that would have done? The algorithm doesn't reward reinvention. You start a new channel, you start at 0 subscribers, 0 momentum. Everything we built gone. So you killed him. Mercer was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, I removed the problem. Tell me how. Mercer leaned back. I studied prodrug systems in pharma. The concept of a compound that's inert until activated by the body's own metabolism, it's standard practice in drug design. I just extended the concept, split the prodrug into 3 parts instead of 2, made each part independently harmless. Designed the final activation to depend on the victim's own dietary choices. You engineered Jake's murder to be triggered by his own habits. His predictability made it possible. 3 years of watching him, managing his schedule, knowing exactly what he eats, where he eats, when he eats. The pork jowl at Ember and Ash, he ordered it every single time. The hot sauce on everything, it was part of his brand. Even accepting fan gifts on camera, he never said no. He was so trusting. A ghost of something, contempt? Regret? Crossed Mercer's face. He made it easy. The 2 people you hired. Taylor and Derek. They could have led back to you. I used burner accounts and crypto for the initial contact. Converted to Venmo only for the final payment because they insisted on something traceable, said it felt more legit. That was my mistake. He paused. One of my mistakes. What about the woman at Cahokia? How did you ensure she'd Jake at the right time? I built Jake's schedule. I knew exactly when he'd be atop Monk's Mound. I told Taylor to be there between 7:15 and 7:30. Simple. And the man in Seattle? Same thing. I knew Jake would hit Pike Place at lunch, knew he'd go to that specific stall. Told Derek to be there at 12:30, sit at the counter, and place the bottle in the condiment area after Jake sat down. And you? Where were you? Mercer's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Home. In my apartment. Watching the stream, like everyone else. You watched him die. I watched the culmination of 6 months of planning execute flawlessly. He said it without inflection, as if describing the launch of a product campaign. Moretti leaned forward. Did you feel anything? Mercer stared at the table. The silence stretched. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked for the first time. I felt relief. The arrest and confession of Ryan Mercer made national headlines. YouTubers dat as elaborate as 3 city poisoning, the Times ran. The murder that 87,000 people watched and no one saw, said the Post. Cable news ran segments for weeks. Podcasts dissected every angle. The biochemistry of the kill became a grim fascination for millions. But for Blackwood, the spectacle held no appeal. He sat in his office on the evening the news broke, the television off, The only sound the gentle tick of the Mantel clock and the distant rumble of traffic on Irving Place. 87,000 witnesses, he said to Nadia, who was curled in the opposite armchair with a cup of tea, and not one of them saw a crime. The camera captured everything: his pupils, his tremors, his collapse, and it meant nothing to anyone watching. Because they didn't have the framework to interpret what they were seeing, Nadia said. That's the deeper pathology of this case. We live in an age of total surveillance, cameras everywhere, streams everywhere, everything documented, and yet a man can be murdered in front of nearly 100,000 people and no one recognizes it. Because seeing is not the same as understanding. The camera became the locked room, Nadia observed, a psychological sealed chamber. Because it was on camera, because tens of thousands were watching, no one could conceive that a murder was taking place. The visibility itself became a form of invisibility, a digital locked room. Blackwood turned the phrase over. Yes, that's what this was. Not a room locked from the inside, a room sealed by the assumption that public observation precludes crime. The openness was the lock. He reached for his pipe of Briar Peterson that he kept more as a thinking prop than a vice these days and rolled it between his fingers without lighting it. This is the second time we've encountered a paradoxical sealed room. The first was a geographical open space so open that no one questioned how a dead man got there. This time it's a digital open space so visible that no one questioned whether what they were seeing was murder. The criminal mind adapts, Nadia said. It finds new spaces to hide, not in darkness, but in overwhelming light. And the only countermeasure remains the same as it's always been. Blackwood set down the pipe. Careful observation, scientific rigor, the refusal to accept the obvious explanation simply because it's comfortable. A week after the arrest, an envelope arrived at Blackwood's office. The return address was a small town in Oregon. Jake Whitmore's parents lived there. Inside was a handwritten note from Jake's mother. Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Webb told me what you and Dr. Volkov did for our boy. Thank you. I enclosed something we found in Jake's desk. I thought you might want to see it. Beneath the note was a single sheet of paper, covered in Jake's handwriting. It was a list. Places I will go next. 1. The pyramids at Giza, sunrise from the Sphinx. 2. The salt flats of Bolivia, walking on clouds. 3. The northern lights from a glass igloo in Finnish Lapland. 4. A fishing village in Mozambique, where they still use dhow sails. 5. The monastery libraries of Mitiura, books above the clouds. At the bottom, underlined 3 times, the world is bigger than the algorithm. Blackwood read it twice, then set it on his desk. He sat looking at it for a long time. Jake Whitmore had dreamed of pyramids and northern lights and fishing villages. He'd dreamed of breaking free from the machinery that had made him famous and finding, once again, the pure joy of discovery that had made him pick up a camera in the first place. And the man who'd built that machinery had killed him to prevent his escape. The tragedy was not merely the death. It was the silencing of a particular kind of wonder, the generous, infectious curiosity that had drawn millions of people to watch a stranger eat soup in Seattle and feel, for a few minutes, that the world was full of warmth and possibility. Blackwood carefully folded the paper and placed it in his case file. Then he closed the file and put it on the shelf with the others. On the last day of April, Blackwood found himself walking the High Line alone. It was late afternoon, and the elevated park was busy with joggers and couples taking in the view of the Hudson River. The rain of the confrontation night was a memory. Today the sky was clear and the sunlight fell warm on the High Line's wild plantings. He walked to the spot where he had stopped Mercer. There was nothing to mark it, no plaque, no memorial, just a stretch of walkway like any other. A bench. A clump of ornamental grass. The distant sound of traffic from 10th Avenue below. Jake had walked this neighborhood 100 times. The restaurant where he died was 2 blocks east. The High Line had probably been part of his daily life, a shortcut, a thinking path, a place to decompress after filming, and it had become the backdrop for the final act of his story. Blackwood sat on the bench and watched the people pass. A woman pushing a stroller. Two teenagers taking selfies. An elderly man with a sketchbook, drawing the Empire State Building visible in the distance. None of them knew what had happened here 12 days ago. None of them needed to. The city absorbs its tragedies and moves forward. That is both its cruelty and its mercy. When the shadows grew long, Blackwood stood, adjusted his grip on his walking stick, and made his way back east toward Irving Place. The office at dusk. The last light of an April evening slanted through the tall windows, painting the bookshelves in amber. Blackwood settled into his armchair with the careful deliberateness of a man whose joints remember every year of hard service. He reached for his pipe, packed it with a Virginia blend, and struck a match. The first fragrant curl of smoke rose toward the ceiling. Nadia emerged from the small kitchen at the back of the office, carrying a tray with 2 cups. She set one before Blackwood, a porcelain cup filled with clear golden liquid that released a gentle citrus aroma. "What's this?" he asked. "Yuzu tea. I ordered it from a Japanese import shop. It seemed appropriate. A different kind of citrus drink to replace the one that started all of this." Blackwood lifted the cup and inhaled. The scent was clean, bright, uncomplicated, nothing hidden in it, nothing waiting to unfold. "Nadia," he said, after the first sip. "Yes, a man who brought joy and wonder to millions whose beautiful journeys across this country and beyond gave people a taste of the world's richness. Even that man's path, once human greed infected it, became the most terrifying assassination route imaginable." Nadia settled into her chair with her own cup, legs tucked beneath her in the way she always sat when the day's work was truly done. The killer tried to shatter the truth into fragments and scatter it across a continent buried in time zones and digestive chemistry and the noise of ordinary life. But in the end, an unshakable commitment to observation and the unforgiving precision of molecular science caught every fragment and pieced it back together. She blew gently across the surface of her tea. "Drink your tea, Elliot. Let it wash away the smoke and the sorrow." Blackwood's mouth curved in the faintest suggestion of a smile, the expression he wore only in moments like these, when a case was closed and the silence that followed was earned rather than empty. He raised his cup. Nadia raised hers. They touched rims with a soft clink that barely registered in the quiet room. 2 minds, one trained in the ancient art of deduction, reading dirt and shoes and body language, and the 1,000 tiny tells that human beings cannot help but leave behind. The other fluent in the invisible language of molecules, the chemical conversations happening in blood and tissue that no lie can silence. Together, they had seen through the most elaborate murder either had ever encountered. A killing designed to be undetectable, distributed across a continent, hidden inside the victim's own body, and they had found it. Not because they were lucky, but because they refused to accept the easy answer. The pipe smoke coiled upward. The yuzu sent its citrus warmth through their bodies. Outside, New York continued its eternal noise, sirens and laughter, and the rumble of the subway, indifferent to the resolution of one quiet tragedy among millions. Jake Whitmore's camera was dark. His channel would never update again. But somewhere, perhaps, a young person was picking up a camera for the first time, pointing it at a horizon they'd never explored, and saying to an audience that didn't yet exist, "Come with me. Let me show you something beautiful. The world is bigger than the algorithm." Jake had known that. And knowing it had cost him everything. But the world remained, and it was still, despite everything, full of places worth seeing. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 9. The office was dim now, lit only by the desk lamp and the soft glow of the city filtering through the windows. Blackwood's pipe had gone out. He hadn't bothered to relight it. On the desk, a new case file sat unopened. A potential client had called that afternoon, something about a suspicious death in a locked laboratory at MIT. Blackwood would read it tomorrow. Tonight belonged to stillness. Nadia had retreated to the small apartment she kept above the office, one of the perks of their arrangement. He could hear her footsteps overhead, the faint sound of music, something classical, perhaps Debussy, drifting through the old floorboards. Blackwood gazed at the shelf where the Whitmore case file now rested beside the others. Each file represented a truth recovered from the darkness. Each one had cost something in time, in effort, in the accumulated weight of human cruelty observed and catalogued and filed away. But each one was also proof that the darkness was not absolute. That observation and intelligence and persistence could illuminate even the most carefully constructed lie. He stood, switched off the desk lamp, and moved to the window. Irving Place was quiet at this hour. A few dog walkers, a taxi gliding past, the warm yellow light of the Italian restaurant across the street. Somewhere in this city, in this country, in this world, another elaborate falsehood was being constructed. Another victim was being circled. Another crime was being designed to be invisible. And when it surfaced, when the impossible death or the inexplicable disappearance or the locked room mystery presented itself to the world as unsolvable, Blackwood and Volkov would be here, waiting, ready. Truth does not announce itself. It must be pursued, cornered, extracted from the noise of a million competing claims. It requires patience, intelligence, and the courage to say, no. The simple answer is not enough. Look deeper. Blackwood turned from the window and walked to the door. Good night, Jake, he said quietly to no one, to the memory of a man who'd loved the world enough to share it with strangers. Then he climbed the stairs to his own quarters, leaving the office in darkness and silence. The case was closed. The next one was waiting.